Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
At this stage of the game, our main focus is making sure that everybody is safe.
State of emergency in Squamish. A wildfire burning out of control. Also,
it shows what can happen, and that's why we have to be vigilant everywhere.
a Mission Institution inmate dies. A superstore employee tests positive for COVID-19. And
in the short term, we're going to be having to think about how do I do my business with still maintaining those safe distances.
preparing for the new normal. Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix answer your COVID-19 questions.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. We begin tonight in Squamish, where a wildfire has grown to more than 100 hectares. Dozens have been forced from their homes as crews battle the fire from the ground and the air. As John Hernandez reports, strong winds and warm temperatures aren't making it easy.
3 helicopters drawing water from the Squamish River, dousing the flames as they take over the mountain.
When we came down, we just could see that the side of the roads were burnt, the electrical wires were all burnt.
The fire started Wednesday afternoon, spreading from a controlled burn at a property on Squamish Valley Road.
I look up and there's smoke coming over the canopy, and we're like, oh, that's a fire. And one of us ripped over on the dirt bike to go check out, see what was going on. And
nearby resident Francis Morell first noticed the fire when it was about 3 kilometers away from his home.
It gets pretty close, and the idea is just stop it before it gets too big, but it got really, really big really quickly.
Within minutes, it spread to his farm, forcing him and others to flee. This, the view from the front seat of his truck.
It was crazy. It was crazy. Just hoping that your tires don't melt and that you get out of there. I think the biggest thing that was on my mind was I really hope that there's no tree on the road, because I really would have kicked myself for not buying that new chainsaw.
The wildfire has now grown to more than 100 hectares. An evacuation order spans dozens of properties. This roadblock only letting people leave.
The message to people, obviously it's pretty tough because we don't have any cell service in some of those areas, but just to follow the direction of all those people out there. We have RCMP members up there, Conservation Service members, Coastal Fire.
The spread has slowed, but winds and high temperatures are still raising concerns. A situation made even more challenging by the COVID-19 pandemic.
At this stage of the game, our main focus is making sure that everybody is safe, that everybody is out that needs to get out, making sure that the livestock and the animals are taken care of that we can.
A local state of emergency has been declared and a province-wide burn ban is now in effect. An investigation into this fire is ongoing, but no charges have been laid. John Hernandez, CBC News, Squamish.
Okay, let's bring in meteorologist Brett Soderholm now. And Brett, the conditions there not helping the situation in Squamish.
Certainly not. We've been dealing with just incredibly dry conditions all the way across the south coast, and of course this includes Squamish, and the large reason for this has just been a dominant area of high pressure. Now, not only does that make the skies clear and allows the surface to heat up and dry out to an abnormal extent, it also has the unfortunate side effect of trapping smoke at the surface. And I wanted to show you a time lapse started from yesterday overlooking the Chief and Howe Sound, just to kind of give you an idea of what this means. High pressure is representative of sinking air. That means that the wisps of smoke that you're seeing there, they don't have the chance to kind of get away. They're stuck at the surface, and that certainly, of course, increasing the risk for some respiratory issues, I should say, and making the skies, of course, a little bit smoky. Now, as a result of that, of course, our fire danger rating right now of the utmost importance is still quite high in the region, and I wanted to show you across BC, predominantly the western half of the province is still looking at moderate fire danger rating, if not high, in certain pockets there. Now, the one other major factor here that we did mention a little bit earlier, we heard about the winds. Fortunately, winds are going to be calming down over the night tonight and getting into tomorrow. So this is going to help to sort of keep the fire as it is. It's not likely for it to be growing all that much. And the last piece of the puzzle does have to contain, obviously, a bit of rain. At this point in time, we're still not looking at any significant rain coming to Squamish until about next week, though there is the slightest chance for some showers Friday overnight into Saturday. But aside from that, it's going to still be remaining dry for the next foreseeable future.
Okay, Brett, thank you very much. We will talk to you again in a bit. BC has recorded 3 new deaths today from COVID-19 and 14 new cases. We also have the first death linked to COVID-19 inside a Lower Mainland prison. To bring us the latest on that and the pandemic across BC, our Dan Burritt joins us now. Live. First, Dan, tell us more about the prison death.
Yes, as an inmate at the Mission Medium Security Prison, the site of one of the largest COVID outbreaks in our province. Correctional Service Canada says the prisoner was sent to Abbotsford Regional Hospital yesterday and died there from apparent COVID complications. 54 inmates have tested positive for the disease at the institution, and the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers says 8 of its members are infected as well. As you mentioned, Mike, BC has lost 3 more people to COVID-19 today, bringing our total to 78. There are 14 new cases, that bringing our total to 1,575. And 983 people are believed to have recovered at this point.
And Dan, we're also hearing about a couple of new outbreaks. Where are they?
Yes, 2 in fact. First is at a long-term care facility in Cranbrook. Interior Health says a staff member of Kootenay Street Village has been diagnosed with COVID-19. They're now isolating at home, and no residents have been affected for now. There are 36 beds at that facility, and the risk of the exposure is said to be low. Residents and staff movement has now been basically restricted. Cleaning has been beefed up, and residents and workers are now getting checked twice a day. An outbreak has also been declared in an acute care unit at the Ridge Meadows Hospital in Fraser Health. Mike.
All right, Dan Burritt reporting live tonight. Thanks. Through physical distancing and following the orders of Dr. Bonnie Henry, we've been seeing the curve flatten in BC for new COVID-19 cases. But some of the numbers the government has been providing lately aren't entirely accurate. Our Justin McElroy is the numbers guy. So, Justin, what are we not seeing here?
What we haven't been seeing, Mike, for the last week are the number of recovered cases in Vancouver Coastal Health. And that's a pretty large region of the province. It covers the city of Vancouver and the North Shore, along with areas of the Central Coast. And ever since April 8th, they've been stuck on the same number of officially confirmed recovered cases. But at the same time, they've also been giving new cases as well. So what does this mean? Well, take a look at this chart. It shows the number of active cases the province has been dealing with, basically combination of all confirmed cases since this outbreak began, subtracting the number of recoveries. But because that recovery standpoint has been lagging from Vancouver Coastal Health, it's made it appear as though the trend line has been creeping back up. Now we know that's not the case, but the big question we still don't know is why the provincial government hasn't been publicly announcing that Vancouver Coastal Health has been having this issue with displaying new recoveries. We put the question to them last night. They still haven't gotten back to us yet. And day after day, Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix have been saying this recovery number that we now know is not entirely accurate. So questions we're still waiting on the government to hear from. There might be some benign explanation as to why Coastal Health is having this issue with displaying recoveries. Hopefully we get that soon.
Hopefully we do. Thanks, Justin. Justin McElroy reporting tonight. And some BC care homes say they are running short on protective gear, and they're worried about what happens if they run out. But as the CBC's Tina Lovegreen reports, new shipments and donations should help ease their worries.
So these are all ear savers that have been donated from people on Facebook.
Michelle Thompson turned to social media to gather personal protective gear for the 2 private long-term care homes she oversees.
We are struggling with our PPE, or our personal protective equipment, for our employees.
They have just 3 to 7 days of supply, which is better than what it was a few days ago, thanks to recent shipments from health authorities. But worries about running out still linger.
And we haven't been able to get clear answers as to how we can access the provincial supply chain and what will happen when we don't have the supplies we need to continue to provide the safe care that we have promised and that we are able to currently do to our most vulnerable.
And the most vulnerable have been hit the hardest. The majority of COVID-19 related deaths have been linked to senior care homes. 21 long-term care homes in the Lower Mainland are dealing with active outbreaks, which makes the sight of empty shelves hard to bear.
We are absolutely working in every long-term care facility in our province to ensure that every encounter with a person, a patient, a resident in that facility is done safely.
The province says new shipments of respirators, face shields, and gloves over the long weekend are helping curb the shortage.
I would say that we're certainly in a critical situation.
Jennifer Lyle with Safe Care BC, a workplace health and safety association for care homes and facilities, says there are still gaps, especially in home care and community living sectors.
I had somebody reach out yesterday who said that they've been unsuccessful in securing any personal protective equipment supplies from both the health authority as well as their own commercial providers.
The association has started its own donation drive called Operation Protect, collecting the basics like unused masks and goggles.
That's the primary concern, is just ensuring that we don't get into a situation where care homes run out of personal protective equipment. And I do believe that there are some pretty significant efforts underway to make that happen.
In the meantime, managers are left counting, rationing, and worrying. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
An employee at a superstore in Vancouver has tested positive for COVID-19. The Real Canadian Superstore in question is located at 3185 Grandview Highway. The employee has been off work since April 9th, according to the parent company Loblaws. Several other workers who had close contact with the infected person are now at home in self-isolation in case they develop symptoms. The grocery store itself was closed for sanitation after the company was informed of the case. It has since reopened. And for BC businesses struggling to stay afloat during the pandemic, an estimated $700 million in new financial relief is on the way. The province has committed to cuts it estimates will save businesses another 25% on their property tax bills after a previous drop of 50%. It'll also push back the penalty date for unpaid property tax on certain commercial properties and has opened relief options for cash-strapped municipalities as well. Small businesses are struggling to stay afloat right across Canada, and today Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced more help is on the way. But as Erica Johnson explains, many in the small business community wonder if it'll be enough.
If the soccer ball is COVID-19, the wall taking a beating is Brendan Quarry's business. He's co-owner of an indoor soccer center ordered shut down 5 weeks ago because of the pandemic.
Effectively, our revenues went to zero.
But he's still got to pay rent, $17,000 a month. He says what he needs from the federal government is more than just a loan.
When you saddle us with debt at a time when our revenues are zero, we're essentially just kicking the can down the road, and we're really hoping that that's not going to be the case.
Across the country, small businesses are hemorrhaging money, calling for emergency rent relief. Telling CBC News, rent is $20,000 a month. I am very stressed. Unable to pay rent, I will be forced to shut my business for good. It's a hardship that I cannot put into words. Staying in the game is going to be hard, according to a new survey of small businesses. 50% aren't confident they can survive past May. 28% have already closed.
That's why rent relief is just so critical. I've heard from business owners who talk about watching their life's work circle the drain.
Her office has been taking up to 800 calls a day from small business owners in distress, some even talking about suicide.
We're hearing from Canadians who need more help, from businesses who need more support.
The Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, announced today, will give loans to commercial property owners so they can lower or forgo the rent for April, May, and June.
But small businesses say the devil is in the details, such as who will qualify and how much it will cover.
Brendan Quarry says he just hopes any government program will be enough to keep his outfit in play. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs, and CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So what will the new normal look like when we finally start to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic? Coming up, Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix answer your questions. And thanks for watching online tonight. More news for you now during the TV commercial break. Well, around the world, research teams are racing towards an unprecedented goal to develop a vaccine within just 1 year. It's never been done. But as Wikidopia shows us, the progress made so far is also unprecedented.
In a pandemic, this is being promoted as must-see TV.
This is the road to a vaccine.
The online show's creator is pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson, one of the dozens of developers around the world racing towards a vaccine. 4 other research teams have already shifted from the lab phase to clinical trials and human volunteers, one in China, the other in the UK, and 2 in the US. One U.S. trial vaccine uses the DNA sequence extracted from the spikes on the coronavirus. When injected, a person's immune system is trained to seek out those spikes.
Anytime you see any signature, something that looks like this spike, anything that has this spike, go pounce on that with the full force of your immune system.
There are more than 60 other potential vaccines in the works in labs. This Canadian team is working on one of them. Some vaccines use all or part of a dead or weakened virus. Others use its DNA or RNA. This vaccine expert says having multiple versions is critical.
So you want redundancy. So it's very important that that all this research is being done, and hopefully there'll be 5, 6, 7, 8 successful vaccines, because we have a whole globe that we need to protect.
Vaccines usually take 5 to 7 years of lab research, animal studies, and clinical trials in humans. But coronavirus research is moving at hyperspeed, a potential risk.
My concern is that in the fear and in the haste to develop a vaccine, we may be tempted to tolerate less than optimal science, and that to me seems unacceptable.
Health officials predict it'll be at least another year before a vaccine is approved for wider use. With no treatment options on the horizon, immunization is the only end game in this pandemic. Wikidopia, CBC News, Toronto.
A lot more COVID-19 coverage still to come tonight. We've got concerns from the Vancouver Public Aquarium about whether they'll be able to stay afloat. There's a new public opinion poll, results of a new public opinion poll out about how people feel they're doing in terms of physical distancing. And then a little bit later, in about 10 minutes or so, we are going to get Dr. Bonnie Henry and Andrea Dix to answer your questions. So stay right here, back in a matter of seconds. Vancouver's Public Aquarium says it has lost more than $3 million since its closing its doors in mid-March. A nonprofit that relies on ticket sales, it's using up reserve funding to keep things going. But as Deborah Goebel reports tonight, the fear is it'll be forced to shut down permanently if it doesn't find financial help soon.
There's an eerie stillness at the Vancouver Aquarium these days. The 70,000 animals who live inside are still here, but they have no visitors. There are no little kids squealing in delight as a sea lion swims past or a penguin waddles over.
I think the most important thing for people to realize that this is a real crisis. We're fighting for our survival here.
Because no ticket sales means no operating revenue. A well-known attraction in Vancouver since 1956. For many, the thought of it not being here is unthinkable.
I think it would be a real loss. I think it would be a real shame, actually.
That would be devastating.
More than 1 million people visit every year. It's definitely had its challenges over the past decades. From protesters to a park board that banned captive whales, dolphins, and porpoises last year. But nothing has affected the aquarium like the impact of the coronavirus. More than 60% of the staff has been laid off, and anything that can be delayed is being delayed.
It hasn't affected animal care as yet.
What it has affected is the off-site marine mammal rescue center run by the aquarium. This is where wild seal pups and sea lions, turtles and otters go when they need medical attention.
There's no doubt about it, we're going to need help from the outside.
Oceanwise, the nonprofit that runs the aquarium, has asked for $9.5 million in emergency funding.
We have applied both to the federal and the provincial governments for financial support 3 weeks ago.
There's also been an outpouring of support from the public with more than $100,000 donated.
Since we went public with our situation yesterday, the support from the public has been moving, actually. There's a lot of support.
If the aquarium were to close, all the marine life and mammals would be moved to new homes around the world. But while they're planning for the worst, they say they're hoping for the best.
We want to make sure that we're here when this is all over.
Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Vancouver.
City of Vancouver is resuming parking enforcement in Kitsilano and in Point Grey. Starting this Friday, tickets will start popping up on vehicles in violation of permit and residential parking zones. It's part of an effort to support physical distancing and to try to keep folks from driving to the beach neighborhoods in the upcoming warmer weather. The city stopped issuing tickets on most Vancouver streets a little more than 2 weeks ago. These steps are on top of the Park Board's closure of parking lots at Kitts Beach and Jericho Beach and the addition of local traffic-only signs on nearby streets. Well, British Columbians rate themselves quite highly in adhering to physical distancing measures, but are far more critical of the province's efforts as a whole, according to the results of a new survey. In a poll of 817 BC residents, 89% rank themselves an 8, 9, or even a perfect 10 when it comes to physical distancing. No one gave themselves a 3 or lower. However, respondents were far more critical of how other people in the province are doing generally. Only 35% gave an 8 or higher. Insights West, which conducted the survey, says public instances of shaming offenders may have given the impression society is doing worse than it actually is. Well, many young people in BC are seeing their studies disrupted and career paths put on hold because of COVID-19. Now BC is launching a free counseling service for post-secondary students to try to help.
Because this 24/7 mental health line will help countless students across the province get the help they need where and when they need it, no matter where they are in BC.
The new program is available to all students currently registered in studies at BC post-secondary schools. Here to Talk is available around the clock and 7 days a week. Students can access confidential, free single-session services by app, phone, or online chat. Well, how can we help with the grandchildren? Do I have to stay away from my boyfriend? Coming up, Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix answer your questions. Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
You know, the cause of the fire will be determined as the days go on and as the fire settles. At this stage of the game, our main focus is making sure that everybody is safe, that everybody is out that needs to get out.
Crews are battling an out-of-control wildfire just north of Squamish from the ground and the air. About 30 people have been evacuated from the Paradise Valley area. One evacuee says several houses have burned down.
The stability of those numbers, particularly things such as people in ICU, people in hospital, is relatively good news because it means that our healthcare system is able to absorb the real challenges posed by COVID-19.
3 new COVID-19 deaths are being reported tonight in BC, bringing the total to 78. There are 14 new cases, but hospitalizations are down from 131 yesterday to 120. 56 people are in intensive care. That's down 3 from yesterday. And joining us now from Victoria to answer your COVID-19 pandemic questions, our Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and Minister of Health, Adrian Dix. Thank you both for doing this. Let's get right to the questions. We've got some good ones. The first to you, Dr. Henry. It's from Matthew in Vancouver asking, what has surprised you most from a medical perspective on how this virus has behaved?
Well, there's quite a few things that I've been learning about this virus since we first heard about it earlier this year. One is how fast it can spread, particularly from people, particularly young, healthy people who don't have a lot of symptoms. And so that makes it really challenging to try and find out who's been in contact with who. The other really surprising and tragic thing is how sick it can make people, particularly our elders and seniors.
All right, next question to you, Minister Dix. It's from Len in Victoria, asking, with respect to the most vulnerable group in senior care facilities, would it be prudent to consider establishing a quarantine facility and move them?
Well, Len, we've taken a lot of action in terms of long-term care. First of all, very significant restrictions on visitors, something that is really difficult for people in long-term care to deal with. That means many people, including people who have passed away since the pandemic began from other things than COVID-19, haven't had access to family members around them, but it's a necessary step. Enhanced use of PPE, which is very important. Right off the bat, in outbreak sites being introduced what's called a single site phenomenon, and we've been dramatically testing healthcare workers and giving that real priority. And those are 4 things that we have done to assist people in long-term care. What we try and do in these things is take the advice of Dr. Henry and our outstanding team of medical health officers and make the right decisions for people. And in long-term care, and this is important, in consultation with them as residents, because they're living in their homes in long-term care and with their families. But I think the measures we've taken are the most significant anywhere in Canada. But that doesn't mean it's not a very serious challenge. As you know, we've lost 49 people now in long-term care, which are the majority of people who have passed away from COVID-19 in BC, and we all grieve their loss.
All right, next question for you, Dr. Henry, on testing. It comes from Graham. On March 25th, you said BC can do 3,500 tests per day. Since then, we've averaged 1,116 tests a day. I assume those numbers are accurate. Is this an issue of capacity, human resources, or part of our strategy?
It's a little bit of both. So early on, we did have some capacity issues around that time in March, and we did look at strategically as well who we were testing. So most of the people who were testing, our test positive rate was only about 1% to 2%. So most people didn't have this, and actually many more had things like influenza. But now we've expanded our testing again. We have quite a lot of capacity, and there's a couple of reasons. There's not as many people getting sick with respiratory illness, so needing testing at this point. But we are definitely making sure that we're testing everybody who might be at risk for this disease now, and we will be going forward.
All right, thank you for that. I think it's fair to say that relationships, personal relationships, have been put to the test during this period. Here's a question for you, Minister Dix, from Jennifer, asking or saying, my boyfriend and I have been together for 1.5 years, but do not live together. We have not seen each other for a month. We want to do our part in physical distancing, but is there any hope for couples that do not live together?
It's a real challenge for all of us. I mean, we all have loved ones that we haven't been able to see in the past month. I talked about people in long-term care just a little while ago who, in many cases, the visits of family members and friends as life-sustaining are people in this couple's situation who's the same. And I think we have to find new ways to sustain each other, to engage virtually right now. And I know it's difficult for people, because what we're going to try and do in the future, there isn't going to be a going back to normal. There isn't going to be a going back to what things were like in January or December. There's going to be a new normal, and we need to ensure that we stay connected in these times. So I think there is hope. And the hope is that all of our efforts that have to continue to keep flattening the curve will allow us to make changes based on the science, based on the advice of Dr. Henry, that will allow people in your circumstances to get together.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the new normal a little later, but right now a question from Lynn for Dr. Henry, wanting to know, the education minister said earlier this week schools might reopen before the end of this school year. What conditions, criteria will be used to make that decision?
Well, there's quite a lot of things, and I really salute the work of the teachers, the school districts, and the Ministry of Health, or the Ministry of Education. We've been working together to see what's the best way to support kids going through this system during this unprecedented crisis. And really, we want to focus on how can we have classroom openings for those children who need it most. So children of essential service workers, children who are falling behind, where school is a really important part of their structure in their life, and maybe even things like the time they get a meal in a day. So those are the things we're looking at, but it really has to be in tandem with making sure that we have all the measures in place to be able to detect increased transmission of COVID-19 and make sure we're doing still those distancing measures that protect everybody from transmission.
Okay, and that's the public school system. I assume that applies to universities as well, that would be hoping to gear back up in the fall?
Yeah, and we'll have to look at longer term plans for the fall. Most universities have adapted to having virtual classes and having virtual exams and things around this time of year. So there's a little bit more time to look at how we can strategize for how to do it safely in the fall.
All right, a question for you, Minister, from Prabha in Vancouver. With your recent order that bans health workers working from multiple long-term care facilities, I lost 60% of my income from one facility and was left with one part-time income from one facility. Where is the help for us?
Well, I think help is on the way. The intent of the order and the intent of the action that's been negotiated, and it's been led by an organization called HEABC, which is health employers and also health unions and others, is to ensure that people are kept whole in terms of work. And it's a complicated thing to do. So there are many thousands of workers in BC, several thousand, who work at multiple sites, like the person asking the question. And so if they have concerns, I'd be happy to see them specifically. But the idea is that people maintain their work. Their salaries in many cases are being raised. So this is going to cost us $10 million a month more than it did before. So they should be more than whole in many cases, or at least whole. And if there are concerns, I'd be happy to hear from your viewer and see how that's working in her example, because the idea is that we need our care workers right now. We need to ensure that there are care workers in all sites, so we don't have everyone choosing to work at the same site. And that's the reason for the emergency part of the order. But we also have to make sure that our care workers at a time when they're doing extraordinary, demanding, stressful work are supported. So I'd be very interested to hear directly from your viewer and to understand her circumstances so that we can do something about it.
All right, thanks, Prabha, for that question, and to Minister Dix. Next one, a virus-related question for you, Dr. Henry, from Chris on Gabriola Island. Do people who have COVID-19 but are asymptomatic remain carriers forever, or do their immune systems kill the virus like those who develop symptoms and get sick?
Yeah, that's a very good and complicated question. So what we know right now is that people who are asymptomatic often can test negative, but they may test positive, and there may be a reason why we test them. Or people have very mild symptoms that they may not even recognize. And yes, their immune systems do fight off the virus. So they do eventually, and we have been following people in this situation, eventually their tests become negative. What we don't have yet is a good test that lets us know if somebody's immune system has responded and developed antibodies. So we are in the throes of testing a number of tests to validate them so that we can look at if people who have been affected, whether they've develop symptoms or not, have those antibodies that protect them from getting infected again over the coming months or even longer.
All right, we got a lot of questions from grandparents, including this one for you, Dr. Henry, from Karen, saying we would like to be able to assist our grandchildren with some of their schoolwork or simply have them over for a few hours a week to give their parents a much needed break. Is there some way we can do this safely?
No, that is such a challenging question, and I get it. But right now, we're still at that point in our pandemic where there's still quite a risk for people. So if you have not been around your grandchildren right now, probably put it off a little bit longer. Stick to those virtual ways of supporting them. You know, FaceTime them when they're doing their homework, that sort of thing, if they'll let you. I think the other really important thing is if you're somebody who is, well, older but has other underlying conditions that affect your immune system, you're much more likely to get severe disease from this. So that's why we need to protect you. Our seniors and our elders in our communities are so important to us. So this is a way of trying to cocoon and protect our elders from this virus. And when we get to that point where the transmission is low enough in our community, I think hugging your grandchildren will be one of the first things you can do.
All right, very good. Question for you, Minister, from John in Ferndale, asking if wearing a mask can help prevent droplets from spreading either from a symptomatic or asymptomatic person. Why not require all to wear one in public like they're doing in California?
So the person who gives the definitive mask answer is Dr. Bonnie Henry. And so I'm going to pass this one on to Dr. Henry to speak to.
I think that's fair. I mean, this is something we've been talking about quite a lot. So yes, the really important thing right now is we know that around the world, medical masks and medical respirators, what we call N95 respirators, are in short supply. And we need to reserve them for our healthcare workers. That's paramount. Other than that, around the world, there has been some advice around whether it's okay to wear a cloth, homemade type cloth mask or face covering. And it is, in my mind, an analogy of covering your cough or coughing into your elbow. It's something that keeps your droplets in. It's not going to protect you from inhaling somebody else's droplets necessarily if they're sick with this and they cough in your face, but it is a way of you not letting your droplets out. And for those short periods of time where you can't maintain physical distancing, it's a reasonable approach. But I would say the proven ways we know that stop the transmission of this virus are keeping our safe distance, and that's 1 to 2 meters from others, washing our hands regularly, and most importantly, staying away from others and staying in if you're not feeling well yourself.
Okay, Minister, we'll let you have a go at this one from Jason. Obviously, it's not possible to stay 2 meters away from a coworker when traveling between work sites in a vehicle. We've certainly seen a lot of that. What are your suggestions on this? Thinking of landscapers, movers, junk disposal, other trades.
I think people have to do their best, but the advice is to stay 2 meters apart. The advice is to be conscious at all times in work of issues of transmission. And we see this on construction sites, for example, right now, where we have people who used to work together on floors working on different floors, electricians and drywallers at different times. So the answer is to do everything you can to follow the advice that Dr. Henry and public health officers have put forward. And sometimes that's difficult in a single vehicle. But I think we have to be conscious of it, conscious of our own conduct, conscious of consistently washing our hands, of not touching our face, of sneezing or coughing into our arm. These are all critical things that we can do that also stop the transmission of the virus. And did I mention washing your hands?
Yeah, you
We'll
mentioned
wash
that.
them
Yeah.
again.
Okay. Here's one for you, Dr. Henry from Larry in Maple Bay. Do you feel like you're minimizing the extent of COVID-19 in BC by reporting only confirmed cases and not probable cases?
Yeah, so we actually don't have probable cases. That was a label that we had early on when laboratory tests had to be confirmed at either our central provincial lab, or initially it had to be confirmed at the National Laboratory in Winnipeg. So we don't use that term here. We have people who are under investigation that we think might have this, and then if they're tested, if they meet the clinical criteria, or if they're an epidemiologically linked case, then we count them. But with our testing strategy, particularly when we were focusing on detecting outbreaks and protecting our healthcare system and long-term care, there were a lot of people, particularly people who had returned from other countries where they might have been exposed, who had mild disease, and we told them they needed to self-isolate at home, and we haven't counted those people, and we know that. That we will be able to understand how many people were actually infected when we have those serology tests that I was talking about earlier.
Okay. Here's one from John on Twitter. I'll let both of you handle this because we're talking about what you guys are calling the new normal. Here's the question. Based on COVID-19's current trend, how long do you think it will be before restrictions are eased? And if I can just add to that, what will that actually look like when we start to ease those restrictions? What's the reality going to be? Do you want to take that first, Minister?
Well, I think we have to remember that there's no vaccine and there's no cure here. So that means that the new normal will be that we'll have to be making adjustments constantly, that we'll have to adapt as we have in our strategy. You've seen the adaptations we've made in, for example, our testing strategy from the beginning. At the end of February, we tested more in British Columbia than the entire United States of America, because that was a valid way of going about it, and it really helped us at that time slow the virus and break the chains of transmission.
We have a few more weeks, and if we continue on the curve that we're on, then we need, and we're planning already, so there's two different areas that we're looking at. One is, how do we get the health system working again for all those people who've had their surgeries postponed, etc. And how do we do that safely, knowing that we still have this circulating? We have this idea of what we call herd immunity, but I prefer to call it community immunity. So there's not enough people anywhere in the world that have been infected with this virus yet, that we have enough immunity in our community to protect everybody. The only way we'll get that is a whole bunch of people getting sick and surviving, or we get a vaccine. So we have to think of a timeline, a horizon between now and a vaccine, which is probably a minimum the next year, maybe longer, hopefully shorter, where we do take these measures that we know work to reduce the transmission of this virus. So that is things like our safe distancing, like cleaning our hands, like making sure we have increased cleaning, like being really, really sensitive about staying away from others if we're sick at all. So in those contexts, we can open up certain businesses. We can open up some of our healthcare, knowing that if we start to see outbreaks or clusters of this virus again, that we can get on them right away. We do the contact tracing. We isolate people and prevent them from transmitting to others. And we have the health system being able to surge and respond to that. So it's really a delicate balance of having just enough restriction, but not too much. And we're working really hard using the modeling and trying to come up with a plan of what that might look like, and we're going to be providing more information. But in the short term, we're going to be having to think about, how do I do my business with still maintaining those safe distances? And that's the key thing.
All right. And Dr. Henry, we're going to give you the final word tonight. What is I know you're going to be releasing some modeling numbers tomorrow, but what's the most important thing you want people to hear right now?
You know what? The most important thing is what everybody is doing in BC today is making a difference. It is helping us bend that curve. It has protected our healthcare system, our healthcare workers, our communities, and our families. We cannot let that go to waste. We have to keep going with this right now. And to do that, we all need to remember that we're in this together. And we need to be kind to each other. We need to support each other through this, and we need to stay safe.
All right, well, we'll wait for word from you both tomorrow. We certainly look forward to that. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions. As always, they were excellent. And Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix, thanks again very much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And a live look at the Lions tonight. Over on the North Shore at 6:47. A lot of sunshine still out there tonight. But is there rain in our forecast? Brett's going to break down the chances of that happening next. Well, baseball fans in Taiwan aren't missing out on their favorite sport because of the coronavirus pandemic.
And there we go, folks!
And the regular season was delayed because of the outbreak, but it got going over the weekend. And while the crack of the bat is real, The roar of the crowd, well, it's totally fake. No one's actually allowed to attend the games, so as you can see, the stands have been filled with phony fans. The seat fillers include cardboard cutouts, mannequins, and robots that bang drums and generate all that crowd noise. All right, let's go back live to meteorologist Brett Soderholm. Another gorgeous evening out there, and I know you're keeping an eye on the situation in Squamish with those strong winds and warm temperatures affecting the wildfire up there. But generally speaking, another great day today.
Yeah, it has definitely continued to be this trend throughout all week. Lots of sunshine, temperatures above where they should be. But as you mentioned, rightly so, the concern right now is the fact that it is just so dry. And I've actually put some information together in terms of a little bit of a streak that we're on right now. We have now, as of today, been about 12 days long in our streak of dry weather here at YVR. And if you look at the rankings over the years, we're not too far away from the longest stretch of dry weather ever seen in Vancouver. That was set back in 1915. That was 15 days in a row, and presently, as of today, we are tied for 4th place with all of those other years. And the question on everyone's mind, is that going to be breaking anytime soon? Because we are in desperate need of rain, and I'm sorry to say that at least for the next little while, it's still looking really unlikely that we're going to be seeing much in the terms of precipitation. We have a lot more cloud cover building tomorrow, but temperatures are still going to be well above seasonal, and there's only the slightest chance for showers Friday overnight into Saturday. But we still have quite a few days to go before our weather pattern changes. Now, across the province, though, it is a bit of a different story. On the eastern side of the Coast Mountains, it is going to be a little bit rainy throughout the day tomorrow, which is great news because, as we saw earlier with the fire danger rating, it is still quite elevated in these places. So this includes places like Kamloops and Kelowna and down into the Kootenays. Showers are going to be expected essentially off and on throughout the pre-dawn hours of tomorrow and then getting into tomorrow night as well. Now, our temperatures, one thing that we've seen throughout the week, rather, is that it has been so significantly above seasonal. Well, for the next couple of days, we're getting closer to seasonal, especially into the interior. Now, the South Coast and Vancouver Island still probably a good 5 degrees above normal for this time of year, and that trend is going to be continuing not only until Saturday, but that's going to be happening all the way into next week. From a 5-day forecast perspective here, you're going to notice still temperatures 15, 16. These are going to be warmer as you are farther inland, so places say like Pitt Meadows or getting into the Fraser Valley, that's going to even be closer to 20. But what you'll notice there at the very end on Tuesday, there are some showers in the icon at that point. Now, it's still a little bit too early to tell, but I have pretty good confidence that sometime between Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we're going to be shifting our weather gears here, and we should hopefully get some of that much needed rain coming our way.
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a while. Okay, Brett, thanks very much. We'll be. Yeah, it's really relevant here in Metro Vancouver.
There are so many stories in this city to tell and to explore.
Like this.
The fact that people come from all over and want to make a home here, that says a lot about the city.
Our lives are rapidly changing. When the news affects you most, we're still here. Stay calm, stay informed. We're all in this together.
I'm clapping for all of us. There's so many essential workers. I want them to be seen.
Turn on your radio and join us as we bring you a little companionship, community, and connection. Weekday mornings beginning at 5 a.m.
And just a reminder, you can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news right here at 11 with Dan Burritt at 11, as mentioned, right after the national, all the latest on COVID-19. Just also want to thank Dr. Bonnie Henry, our provincial health officer, and Health Minister Adrian Dix for answering your questions earlier tonight on this broadcast. Our sincere thanks to them. So we're going to leave you tonight with some shots of the aquarium, minus the people, the animals there, practicing the art of physical distancing as well. Thanks for watching. Good night.